the younger people may not know him. And just to say briefly, he finished his PhD from University of Delhi in 2015. Then his first postdoctoral fellowship was with Taiwan during 2015 to 2018. And he is with Rice University from 2018 onwards. And during all these years, he has been doing very well. So he was alignment, calibration, and database L2 convener during 2016 to 2018. He just finished his H2WW group convenership. That's Higgs decay into 2Ws during 2018 to 2020. And so today is the first day after this convenership. You may be slightly relaxed.
Yes.
And I know that you have done so well. I have heard good words about you also. So without any more delay, I request you to get started. And thank you again. Okay, start the recording, please.
Yeah, thank you very much for these kind words and for this opportunity. It's always nice to interact with students and to motivate them for the data analysis and for all the activities that are happening in CMS. So I hope you can see the slides.
Yes.
Okay. So as you know, today the topic is about the differential cross-section measurement of Higgs boson in CMS, and most of the major channels in Higgs are performing these kind of measurements, but since most of the methodology is same, so I will focus mainly on Higgs2WW, which is actually a full run 2 result, and I will also touch some. I'll also touch the results of Higgs2ZZ. That's also with full run 2 and got public last year. But there are of course many other analyses in this area which are still ongoing with the full run 2 data, and you can follow them of course on the various hypernews. So okay, so on slide 2, this is the outline of my presentation. So I'll briefly go over LHC and CMS detector and the performance of CMS detector during run 2. Then I'll introduce the Higgs physics at LHC, where we are actually going towards the precision measurements, and I'll show you the that why we do differential cross-section measurements and how it is different from the other kind of measurements that we are doing. And I'll go in more details of Higgs2WW differential analysis, and then I'll summarize and we'll have a few words on the outlook of these measurements in future. Okay, you all know about LHC. So it's the largest and the highest energy particle collider in the world. Those of you who have come to CERN may have gone to either one of these experiments. So there are 4 major experiments at various points in on the LHC ring, which is 100-meter down, and we, as you know, I mean, we are part of CMS collaboration, which is from the CERN campus is almost like 20 kilometers away on the other side of the ring. So the CERN campus is here near the Atlas. So CMS is diametrically opposite the control room basically. So so LHC started delivering data in 2009, and currently, as you know, we are in long shutdown 2. Because of COVID, the shutdown has been extended by almost a year, and because of the upgrades, the delay in the upgrade work that is ongoing for the detectors. And we will start, we will have beam again for run 3 in 2022. And you can see the LHC and the HL-LHC, high luminosity LHC timeline. You may have seen it in the previous presentation, so I'll not go into the details of this. Now, on the CMS detector, you probably are aware of the basic structure of the CMS detector. So it is shaped like a cylindrical onion with several concentric layers of the components, starting with the silicon-based tracker, so which is again pixel and the strips, and then we have colorimetric system. starting with the electromagnetic calorimeter, and then the hadronic calorimeter, and then we have our 3.8 Tesla magnet and the muon system at the end. So, okay, now Run 2 actually began in 2015 originally, but in 2015 we had a lot of commissioning going on, and also we had some problems with the CMS magnet. So basically as you can see that for 2015 the luminosity was the delivered luminosity was not very high, but the real Run 2 began in 2016 and it ended in the end of 2018. And LHC, during this period, LHC delivered 162, almost 63 femtobarn inverse of luminosity. CMS recorded this luminosity at 91% efficiency. And then the golden data set, or the data set that we have for the physics analysis, corresponds to 137 inverse femtobarn of the integrated luminosity across all these years, which is a very nice data set to look into the properties of the Higgs, because as you know, I mean, Higgs boson was discovered or was observed actually in 2012 with the Run 1 data, and so this Run 2 data set gives us an opportunity to look deeper into the properties of the Higgs boson. And at the time of the discovery, there were only few channels that were contributing, and only gluon fusion production mode was probed. But now with this data set, we can actually go over most of the decay channels and the production modes of Higgs. So this is everything that we measure at CMS. So on the horizontal axis, you have the physics processes, and on the vertical axis, you have the range of the cross section of the various processes that we have. So you see that we at CMS we really cover a lot of a range in terms of the measurements. And so we have production of the W and the Z, which have very high cross section, and then on the rightmost side are the production of the Higgs through various mechanisms. And you see that we have 7 TeV measurements, 8 TeV measurements, and 13 TeV measurements, and most of the measurements that we have, well, actually all of the measurements that we have are matching with the theory prediction until now. So now going over to the Higgs, so we have 4 major production modes that we can probe at LHC. So the most dominant one is the gluon fusion production mode, which is, as you know, it goes through the top loop. So it is sensitive to the Higgs coupling with fermions. Then you have vector boson fusion, where you have Higgs produced along with the 2 forward jets. Then you have Higgs-Starling process, where you have Higgs produced in association with the vector boson, W or Z. And the last one is the associated production of Higgs with the TT bar or the BB bar pair. But the BB bar Higgs has a very, very small cross section, so that's not actually been attempted yet. But we have observed Higgs in TT bar Higgs as well. Now, so as you can see, the cross section of the gluon fusion is way high at 125 GeV than the other production modes. And in terms of decay, if you talk about, you have the major decay channel is the BB bar. So the highest branching ratio is the BB bar, and then WW, which we are going to talk about in more details today, is the second highest branching ratio channel that we have. And then, of course, there are other more more accurate channels like the ZZ and with the full electronic final state and Higgs to gamma gamma, which I guess you have discussed yesterday with Rasti. Okay, so I'll just try to motivate in few words that why Higgs boson properties are important. So as I said, Higgs boson was discovered in July 2012 with Run 1 data. And after the discovery, actually, Higgs boson properties measurement has been the main goal of LHC Run 2. And we expect to see Higgs in all the production mode, and actually we have observed it in all production modes, as well as in major decay channels. and that actually provides an optimal set of optimal test of standard model compatibility. And and this table that I got from this this archive paper that is linked on the slide, and you see that why the precise measurement of the coupling of Higgs to either fermion or to the vector boson is important, because it affects it affects these BSM models that we have. So if you measure it precisely, you can really test these models and see if you see any deviation from standard model. Now Higgs 2 WW, as I said, has very high branching ratio, so is one of the key channels for these kind of measurements. So so our first step was to observe the Higgs, which was done in run 1. Now the next step, which we are in the middle of that, is the Higgs boson measurements, and today we are going to discuss about this. Now you can measure the properties of Higgs or in many ways. So one is the direct measurement of the direct measurement of the properties by measuring the signal strength. So basically by measuring the cross section of Higgs into various final states, and then you have the extreme right, you actually have fiducial and the differential cross section measurements. So if you go along from left to right, you basically are minimizing the theory dependence, and because in the signal, when you measure the cross section, you start from a model, you start from some and there you are of course completely dependent on the theoretical model, and hence the theory uncertainties are become very important. And with this kind of luminosity that we have, they are actually the major uncertainties for some of the channels. Now fiducial and differential cross section, which we are going to talk about in more details today, are the measurements which are very difficult and which are still statistically limited, but they are the ones where we have the minimal theory dependence, because you are really measuring the cross section in a particular phase space in various bins, and you can interpret it in many different ways later on. And there is a middle way in between these two kind of measurements, where you have the extreme theory dependence and the minimal theory dependence, but a very difficult measurement. You have a way called simplified template cross section, which I will discuss like really briefly before moving on to the pure differential measurements. So okay, so this is what actually I just said, so I don't want to go into more details of this. So on slide 13, so this is the so the simplified template cross section scheme actually was proposed and developed by the LHC Higgs cross section working group, which is basically an independent group from the collaborations, which handles all the theory aspects or the phenomenological aspects of Higgs boson for the LHC. So it has people from Atlas, CMS, and theory community, which comes together and try to discuss the various ways to enhance or to broaden the scope of the measurements, or to give new recommendations and recipes for the theory uncertainties and things like this. Now they propose this simplified template cross section scheme, where you, depending on the production mode of Higgs, they propose these bins of where they ask you to measure the cross section of the Higgs in that phase space. So for example, it started with stage 0, meaning where where we were measuring one signal strength per production mode, basically. So one number for gluon fusion, one number for VBF, one number for VH, and then once we get more data, we went to stage 1, where we divided these one bins into various kinematic regions. For example, like here you have PT Higgs 0 to 200, and the second bin is 200 to infinity, and then you have more bins inside 0 to 200. You have 0Z, 1Z, and greater than 2Z. And by the way, these bins are are divided based on the generator level information of the Higgs. They are not Rico level bins; they are generator level bins. So basically, you are kind of already measuring differential cross-section because, or fiducial cross-section in a way, but it's really like a middle ground between the differential, pure differential, and the direct measurements. And with stage 1.1, this is what we actually had from 2017 or 18 onwards. Stage 1.1. So we have the improved gluon fusion, VBF, and VH binning. So as you can see that we have a lot more bins to, we have added a lot more bins, and we are measuring the cross-section of Higgs in all these bins. But of course, all the analyses are not sensitive to all the bins. So sometimes you just merge some of the bins and provide, let's say, one cross-section. Maybe you are not statistically good to get the number in every possible bin. And the latest one is stage 1.2, where first time the TTH bins were also introduced. TTH, mind you, has a very small cross section, but now we can measure, let's say the cross section in the various PT Higgs bin in the TTH. And this is the schema that all the legacy run-to analysis are going to use for their publications. Now let's start Higgs to WW, and on slide 15. So this is the overview of Higgs to WW analysis. So with we had one publication, one public result with 2016 data, which was around 36 inverse femtobarn. And these were the final states that we considered into in that paper, which is linked here. So you see that we divide the analysis into the number of leptons. And so we have 2 lepton, 3, and 4. And then for the 2 leptons, we further divide it into based on the number of jets in the final state. And then later on, with depending on the lepton flavor, you have many final states. So these 2 lepton final states basically are targeted for the gluon fusion and the VBF production modes. But for the VBF, since you have a typical topology of 2 forward high energetic jets, so you have some extra requirements to tag an event as a VBF type of event. And then you have rarer production modes with the 3 and 4 lepton final states. You have associated production of of Higgs with W and Z, and with the 3 lepton and the 4 lepton final states. Now we have all these. We covered all these production modes and final states in the 2016 analysis. Now with the legacy analysis, we added a couple of more final states where you have I mean the gluon fusion and VBF stays the same, but we have more channels we opened up for the VH part, and some of the people from India are also working on those. Now in Higgs to WW, we have this peculiar property of the leptons, which are close to each other. As you will see in one of the, I have one of the event shows, and you will see how the leptons are close in Higgs to WW, and how we can make use of that property. Now, so this was the measurement of the signal strength and the results actually of Higgs to WW 2016 paper. And this was the first observation of Higgs to WW in CMS. And you see that we had a significance of 9.1 sigma, where we were expecting 7.1, and this was the signal strength. So as you can see that it's 1.28 with the overall error of 0.18 and 0.17 on the positive and the negative side. And if you factorize this whole uncertainty into different parts, you can see that we are already with the 2016 data set, we were already systematically, we were close to systematically limited, as you can see, because the statistical uncertainty was not the major one. Okay, so now we actually want to discuss more about the differential analysis, and we have a full run to differential analysis, as and you can see the CADI line is Higgs 19002. So in this analysis, what we do is we measure the Higgs differential of Higgs cross section and fiducial cross section, we call it, and I'll discuss about the fiducial volume later on. In the bins of PT of the Higgs, so we have all these bins, as you can see on the table, and also in the bins of the number of jets. So you have Higgs with 0 jet, 1 jet, 2 jet, 3 jets, and more than equal to or more than 4 jets. And to simplify this analysis, we basically considered only the 2 lepton final states. So where on the major contributor is the gluon fusion, and then as I said earlier, we had like 3 we have jet bins, and then you have we only consider the different flavor final states, basically, where because the amount of the background contamination in the different flavor final state is small as compared to the same flavor. By different flavor, I mean E mu final state, because your one W can go to electron, another W can go to muon, and you have met coming from the neutrinos. And with the same flavor, the thing is that you have a lot of Drellian contamination. And for this kind of measurement, you want to be as pure as possible. So we went ahead with the different flavor final state. Now let's go. So this is the this is one of the Higgs to WW candidate events that we saw in 20. This is 2018. Yes, this is 2018, as you can see here, and you see that this line here, and these are the muon chambers. So this is a muon, and this is an electron, and you have they are close, and then you have this arrow, this purple arrow, as the MET, as the transverse energy, transmission transverse energy. So this is the topology of the Higgs to WW fully leptonic state. Okay, now on slide 19, I'll just discuss about the various steps that we have to go through to do this analysis. So the scope, as you know, is the differential cross-section measurement in number of jets and the PT Higgs bin. This is a production inclusive analysis, although the major contribution comes from gluon fusion, and we analyzed full run-to data. Now, in the steps of this analysis, first, of course, you have to identify the main backgrounds, and this is true for every analysis, basically, not only for this analysis, but all the data analysis that you do in CMS or anywhere, actually, that you first, depending on the topology of your final state, which in this case is 2 leptons with different flavor and missing transverse energy, you have to identify your main backgrounds. And in order to understand those backgrounds, you try to go into the phase spaces where you have these backgrounds as the dominating process, which we call control regions. And this is what we use to validate also the data Monte Carlo matching, because you really need to have very good data and Monte Carlo matching, because otherwise, if you observe any deviation later on from standard model, or if you see anything new, you are not sure whether it is coming from the fluctuations that you have in the data Monte Carlo comparison, or it is really a new resonance or a new particle that you have seen. So you really want to check the validity, the data Monte Carlo matching, and sometimes it's called data Monte Carlo, but I mean, it's really, sometimes it's not Monte Carlo, because some of the backgrounds you measure from data itself, and so it's more like an observation and expectation matching in a way. So so yeah, you have to identify these, and then depending on the amount of backgrounds and the topology and the kinematics of your signal, you decide on the event selection. And the aim of the event selection should always be to maximize the signal extraction, especially in the cases where you have where you are dealing with very low cross sections, as we do in Higgs to W and then in almost all the Higgs channels. Now, and then there is always this possibility to categorize your events if you think that the background composition is different, and this is what is the case in Higgs to W. That's why we divided the analysis into the jet bins first, and then later on, depending on the lepton flavors. And then there are a few ways to perform the final analysis, basically to get the the limits. One is to perform a template analysis, which is basically using the shape of a distribution or a histogram, basically, and you use that to get your to measure your cross section. And then there are other ways to do the analysis, like the parametric way, where you instead of feeding like the shape of a real variable that you use, you feed a you have a distribution function, a parametric distribution function called PDF, and then you use that to represent your signal and the background. Now, every measurement comes with uncertainties, so you really have to understand all the possible sources of uncertainties and then measure those uncertainties in your analysis and to identify their impact. This is also one of the most time-consuming part of the analysis, because there are lots of uncertainties that you have to take care, because we are analyzing a hadron collider data, so there are so many sources of uncertainty that you can have. And also, of course, it depends on analysis to analysis. But for example, in the case of Higgs-2WW, you are dealing with leptons, you're dealing with MET, you are dealing with jets. So you have all possible sources of uncertainty that you can have. And then particularly for the differential analysis, you have to define a fiducial volume, which is basically a set of a minimal set of cuts, and using that. So you go into a phase space and then you measure cross section in that phase space, and you try to define those generator level cuts, which defines your fiducial volume, to be as consistent with your analysis selection. I'll discuss about this in the later slides. But you have to find a middle point. You have to compromise a bit on the definition of the fiducial volume. You want to be as inclusive as possible, but then you can lose the precision of your measurement. Now and then finally in Higgs and I think in almost like all the known exotic searches and measurements, people use Higgs combined package to fit, so to build and maximize the likelihood. And now there is this new, well, it's not really new now, but there is this feature that recently added to Higgs combined package to also have the unfolding simultaneously with the measurement of the signal strength. And this is what we used in this measurement. Okay. Excuse me. So on slide 20, so let's start with the analysis. The first thing you have to figure out in an analysis is what data sets and what triggers you are going to use, because that's the starting point of the analysis. So in this analysis, since we have EMU final state, so we are using muon-EZ primary data set, and of course we also have contributions from the single lepton primary data set. So we take also events from the single lepton data sets, and of course we make sure that there is no overlap or double counting of the events. So for this analysis, these are the list of triggers that we use for 2016, 2017, and 2018. Which is a big list of triggers, but you want to grab as many events as possible. And we of course have to measure the trigger efficiencies of these triggers, and using this tag and probe method, and then we use those efficiency also in Monte Carlo to bring the Monte Carlo to the level of the data. Okay, now I'll go through like really quickly over the definition of the objects that we use in this analysis. So on slide 21 are the lepton definitions. So we are not, I mean, we are using like the standard working points that are provided by the POGs, but we don't, but we really use a combination of them, not like really a single working point. And that's why we have to measure our own efficiencies and scale factors and everything. In Higgs-2WW, we have two working points or two definitions of the identification of for electrons and muons. One we need for the fakeable objects, and this you will see later on that we have one of the backgrounds where you have a jet faking as lepton, and we measure that background using data-driven technique, and to measure that fake rate, you need a definition of a loose working point, because when you use these triggers, there is already some selection that goes into these triggers. So if you see, for example, this one, you have HLT mu8 track ISO very, very loose, and electron 23, Calo ID loose, track ID loose, ISO very loose. So there is already some selection that goes into this. So you cannot really start from let's say with no ID selection, because the events that you have recorded have already gone past this trigger, so they already have passed some kind of ID. So to define the basically the denominator of the fake rate, you have to have some definition of the ID, which basically is called, in our case, is called fakeable object ID, or the loose ID we call it. And then you have the analysis ID or identification working point, and this is true both for electrons and muons. And you see that with these definitions, I'm sure that you have heard of these terms called cut-based tight, cut-based medium, MVID, and all these. So these all ID working points, of course, are proposed by the various physics object groups. So in this case, are from E-gamma as well as from muon POG. And the overall efficiency that we have with these ID working points that we use for all the signal events is close to 3% and 3.5% for all 3 years. Okay, now for the MET and JET. So we in run 2, actually we decided to use well, for 2016 analysis, we used the PF MET, which is also the particle flow MET with some corrections for the pileup. So we used that MET definition for 2016 analysis. But then for the legacy, or for example for this analysis, or the full run 2 analysis, we decided to use a different kind of MET, which is called puppy MET, which is more resilient against pileup. I think you had a lecture from Phil Harris in this series, and actually he was one of the member of the team who proposed this puppy MET. So you see that why we use that. So these are the plots here on the left hand side are the plots for the MET. Basically, so on the left is the particle flow MET, on the right is the puppy MET for the G plus Z's control region. So in this process, in G plus Z's process, there is no real MET. The MET comes from the mismeasurement of Z's, and it is very hard to model. So we wanted to check the data Monte Carlo matching in this kind of control region, that can puppy MET outperform the PF MET, and it did. So if you see, this is 2017 analysis, this is 2017 data, and you see that we still, of course, haven't got the best possible matching, because it's not real MET, but it's much better than what we had from PF MET. So we decided to use puppy MET for this analysis for all 3 years. And for the Z's, we are using AK4 charge hadron subtracted Z, so AK4 CHS we call it, and we use tight Jet ID, and also we have to on the top of the Jet identification, we have to apply some pileup Jet ID, because you have a lot of contamination from the pileup, especially in years 2017 and 2018, and therefore we have to apply the pileup Jet identification. Now, in 2017, you may have seen this, but we had this this problem of we call horns, where you see an excess of data in these eta slices. It's between 2.5 and 3. So our Monte Carlo at that moment was not able to simulate this feature, and so we had to exclude this region of in the Jet data for this measurement from the Jet counting, basically in 2017. Okay, now coming to the core part of the analysis, which is basically to identify the background. So first is, as you can see, with the 2 leptons in the MET in the final state, we have the irreducible non-resonant WW, which comes from standard model. And then you have TT bar background, and which basically again gives you 2 Ws with the two BJets. And then you have Drelian. So since we are considering here E mu final state, so the regular Z2 E, Z2 mu mu, of course, won't contribute, but what contributes here is the Z2 tau tau, where because your taus can go, one tau can decay to electron and the neutrinos, and the another tau can go to muon and neutrinos. So you have E mu final state. Of course, it's just 1/3 and so the 1/3 of the Z is to tau tau, and then of course, the branching ratio of taus to leptons is even smaller. So the background contribution is small, but as you know, I mean, Drelian has a very high cross section, so you really have to take it seriously. And now the fourth major background is the non-prompt, we call it, which is basically a sum of all the backgrounds where you have one real lepton, but the second lepton is not real, is coming from either jet faking as lepton or some other object faking as your lepton. Now, so we have these 4 major backgrounds. Of course, there are other backgrounds which are not very, let's say, dominant, which are the other diboson productions. We have the virtual photon production in association with the vector boson, like the W gamma star and the triboson. Now, for the treatment of these backgrounds, we accept non-prompt. We use Monte Carlo to get the shapes of these backgrounds. So WW, Drelian, and TT bar, we use Monte Carlo for the shapes, and we extract the normalization of these backgrounds from the data using the dedicated control regions, and I'll show you those control regions later in the slides. And for the and the non-prompt, which is the combination of W plus jets and the semi-leptonic TT bar, basically for this background, it's completely data driven. So we don't use any Monte Carlo to estimate this. We use data with the fake rate method, and I'll go in details of that later on. And for the WW background normalization, we do not construct any control region because there is not enough precision on Monte Carlo to extract the normalization from WW background. So we kept it floating in the fit and let the fit decide its normalization. Now this is the set of selection that we have. So we start with the selection of the leptons. So we have 2 leptons at opposite sign and different flavor. Then we have some kinematic requirement of the leptons, 25 GeV on the leading lepton, 13 GeV on the transverse momentum of these leptons, the regular eta cuts, and the MET cut of 20 GeV. You have the PT of the dileptons system as 30 GeV. This mainly helps against the Drelian tau tau tau, and of course we have an extra lepton veto. And then this is the pre-selection, which is actually same for even for the control regions. And then to define a signal region, you have some cuts based on the transverse mass of the entire system with the 2 leptons and the MET, and the transverse mass of the second W. So because of the subleading lepton with the MET, and we also have B-jet veto. Now then you have control regions that we use in the analysis, the TT bar control region. So there, of course, you expect at least 1 B-jet. So you revert the B veto, and you make this requirement of at least 1 B-jet. And in the tau tau control region, you of course keep the B veto, but you use this invariant mass of the dilepton requirement to be in that phase space where you have the Drelian to tau tau as the dominant. So we use these 2 control regions to normalize the TT bar, the top and the single top, and these control regions are built for every jet and PT Higgs bin that we are using in the measurement, and and we only use their number of events to get the normalization, not any shape of their variable, but we check the shape of these variables. Now, to do the final analysis, we use a 2D histogram, which is basically an MLL, the invariant mass of the dilepton versus the transverse mass of Higgs in the fit. And we the categorization of the signal events, as you have seen earlier, was based on the number of jets. But in this case, since we are measuring the cross section in the number of jets, of course you don't divide the events in number of jets. So what we use is the division of events based on the PT of the subleading lepton, because this non-prompt background, first of all, fake rates is different for electrons and muons, as I will show you later, and also it depends on the PT of the lepton. So you really want to separate the regions where you have dominant, you have one of the dominant backgrounds as the non-prompt, and the reason where this non-prompt background is not dominating, because you always try to categorize events in such a way that you have different background compositions. Okay, so this is the splitting that we use, and on slide 25 are the control regions for the top background for the TT bar. So you see here on the top row are the plots for the zero jet fin. On the left plots are 2016, middle plots are 2017 data, and left and rightmost are 2018 data. So you see that we observe a fair agreement, good agreement actually, between the data, the observation, which are the black dots, and the expectation. And you see that we have a quite pure TT bar control region, and specifically in the zero jet, of course, there is a contamination from WW, but if you go higher in the jets, then top becomes the most dominating background. Similarly, we also check the control region of the WW, and we have here the distribution of the PT of the leading lepton, again for all 3 years, and for zero jet and one jet fin, and you see here that we have a pretty good agreement. Now, one thing that I forgot to mention is that when you build these control regions, you try to be as orthogonal to signal region as possible, because you don't want to so there is this policy in CMS analysis to have to keep the signal region blinded until you get pre-approved or and in the ARC review. So what does it mean is that you can't really look at data in the signal region, because with that, if you start looking at data from the beginning in your signal region, then you can bias your selection, because you want to, then you will choose a selection, or you have this tendency to choose a selection where if you see a feature, if you see an enhancement of data somewhere, you want to go into that region. So you want to select only those events, and that can manifest itself in the form of a deviation or an observation of a new particle, which really was not a new particle, but just a manifest of your selection. So we keep the signal region blinded, but then we have all these different phase spaces, which are called control regions, to check your validation of your data. So this is control region of WW, and similarly we have the control region of Delian to tau tau. So you can see that we have a fair agreement here for all 3 years. Of course, the agreement was worse for 2017, and there have been many reasons of that, but they are at least within the uncertainties that we have. Now, I want to talk a little bit in more detail about the fake rates that we measure. So these are basically the rate of the jet faking as your electron or a muon. So what we do here is basically in order to measure the fake rate, we make a control region which is QCD enriched in a way. So we have lots of jets in that control region, and this is the definition of that that control region. So you do not require more than one lepton in that phase space, and you have some cuts For example, the met cut is reversed. As you can see, also the empty cut, which is the transverse mass of the W cut, is reversed, because you want to be in that region where you have more QCD events. You want to have more jets, and then you try to get the fraction of those jets, that how many of those jets pass your lepton ID, so that you can get the fake rate. Now, with this selection, you have a quite nice sample of the jets, and then the fake rate is basically the ratio of the number of events that pass your analysis ID to the number of events which pass your loose cut. Now here that loose cut comes into the picture, because you are applying a trigger to gather these events. So, and there is selection and that goes into this trigger. So you don't want to bias your fake rate estimation from that trigger selection. So you at least, so for the denominator of the fake rate, you try to have a minimal set of cuts which are tight enough to avoid the bias from trigger, but which are of course looser than your analysis lepton ID. So that's the fraction of the fake rate, and then of course we calculate it as a function of the transverse momentum and the eta of the lepton, because it is highly dependent on these two variables. Now, how do we apply these fake rates? So this fake rate is just a probability of your jet faking as lepton, and then you estimate it as a function of PT and eta. Then you apply it also in a control region where you select where you select events where the leptons have passed your loose selection basically, and then depending on the number of leptons in the final state, which in this case is 2, you calculate the weights using this fake rate, and then you apply these weights onto the sample that you have with the loose leptons only, and then you basically go into the signal region where you, using these weights, you kind of extrapolated your loose sample to the sample or to the process or to the amount of background that you have in the signal phase space. Now these are the fake rates for the electrons for all 3 years, on the top as the function of eta, the bottom as the function of PT. So there are two curves if you see. So one is the without electroweak correction and one is with electroweak correction. And what we use in the analysis is with electroweak correction. And the reason is that when you make this kind of control region with this QCD enriched selection, you are applying some ID also to define the denominator, basically to sort of collect these samples. Now, what happens is that every selection comes with an efficiency. So let's say you have a probability of you have an efficiency of 80% or 90%. So it means that 10% of the real leptons can also fail that selection, and those are basically coming from I mean, they were real leptons, so basically they were not like jet faking leptons. So they are the leptons which were the real leptons, but they failed your analysis ID but passed your loose ID, which means that they have you are basically counting them also when you are estimating your fake rate, which you do not really want, because you just want the jets to enter into your events. Now, and what are the processes that can contribute to this are, of course, the Drelian, the WW, and the TT bar, and all these processes. And you need to subtract that contamination from your data, from your control region that you made from data. And in order to do that, we use Monte Carlo. So you basically subtract this contamination of the electroweak from your Monte Carlo, and this is the effect that you see in the fake rate. So what we use in the analysis is basically the red curves. So as you can see that we have that the fake rate varies with the PT and the eta. And similarly for muons, we have the for all 3 years, and with respect to the PT and the eta. Now, in order to validate the authenticity of the correctness of the fake rates, we go into we make a control region where we have same sign leptons, and we know that this kind of phase space is is dominated by the non-prompt processes, by the fake processes, by the processes where you have fakes as the major background. So this is what we do. So this is what the plots are. So these are the plots for 2018, and you see for the 0 jet, 1 jet, and inclusive more than 1 jet, and you see we have a fair agreement between the data and the expectation. Now from this method of fake rate measurement, we have 3 major sources of uncertainty, which of course enters into the final major sources of uncertainty of the analysis. One is the flat uncertainty, 30% we use it. This is in order to cover the jet flavor dependence of the fake rate. So as you see that we only measure fake rate as a function of the PT and the eta, but not as a the flavor of jet. So and we have seen in past that the fake rate can also depend on the flavor of the jets, whether you have the light flavor jets or the B jets or the C jets and things like this. So we do not cover for that, and that's why we use this 30% flat uncertainty. And then we have uncertainty coming from the limited statistics in the control region and that we defined, and also it varies with the change of the selection that you use to define that control region. One of the major selections is the jet PT. Okay, now slide 32. So after all this object selection, event selection, making the control regions, what you really have to do in the differential analysis is to define your signal model and fit. Actually, this is true for other analysis as well, but one extra element that comes here is the fiducial region. So the signal templates that we use here are not split into fiducial and non-fiducial. So you see that these are the set of cuts on this table on the right, which we define, and these are the basic kinematic cuts, and we define these as the fiducial region. So we measure the cross section into this fiducial region, and the cross section, this is the theory cross section that we measure with this set of cuts, and the cross section that we get is 82.5 with an error of 4.2 femtobarn. So the selection that we have is basically a leading and the trailing lepton PT of 25 and 13. So this is exactly the same cuts that we use in the analysis. The pseudo rapidity is exactly the same as we use in the analysis, and then we have and then all other cuts are also very similar to what we use in the analysis. Now you always want to use you always want to try to have the maximum overlap between your signal region that you defined using the analysis selection and the fiducial region that in which you want to measure the cross section. So if you are completely overlapped between these two regions, then of course you have the more precise measurement of the cross section, but you lose flexibility, and sometimes you want to choose a fiducial region which is quite broad in a way, so that you not only can fit your Higgs signal model into that, but you can have let's say a model which is deviated from standard model and can still use those results and still use those cross sections and scale it to test the other models. Now so we try to have this kind of compromise. So if this fiducial region, for example, this is what I try to show in this plot here, that if you go far from signal region, or not far, but if you become more inclusive, then it is become more useful for everyone, but especially for theorists, but you lose precision. Then you are basically you are saying that you are measuring H to WW cross section in those PT bins, but really you are very inclusive. So you are also considering the other sources of the events in your measurement. So that's why you always try to find a middle way where you have a least amount of theory dependence, but you also want to be precise. Okay, slide 33. So this is what I actually mentioned in when I was describing the steps of the analysis, that in that we build a likelihood, and then we use Higgs combined package to fit and unfold at the same time. So this is the likelihood that we that is implemented, and this is what we try to maximize in order to extract the signal strength at the generator level, because it also includes the unfolding. So as you know, I mean, likelihood is a Poisson distribution where you have the observation in the bin J. So it is of course multiplied with across the bins that you use in your analysis. So the final variable, in this case we have 2D, and you have the signal strength at the gen bin. This is already a generator level bin, and then you have a standard model signal prediction in the bin I, and you have the sigma SM out is basically the cross section, which is your non-fiducial region, which is the phase space which is out of your fiducial region but contributes to your analysis, to your RICO level analysis. And then you have background in the bin J, and the nuisance constraints comes like here. And then you also add a regularization term. Now this regularization term is it's sometimes needed in the differential analysis to control the fluctuations in the signal strength or in the cross-section measurement. And this is how this regularization term is implemented. So this is the second derivative of the signal strength modifier across bins. By the way, you can find more details about this likelihood and the implementation of the likelihood in the wiki, in the booklet of the Higgs combination. So in the wiki pages of the Higgs combination group. But this is, by the way, same for I mean, the likelihood structure is same for every Higgs differential measurement. It's not really specific to Higgs problem. What varies is basically whether you need regularization or not. Now, slide 34 are the systematic uncertainties. So these are the major sources of uncertainties that we consider in this analysis. So as you can see, the list of uncertainties are the leftmost column in this table, where you have integrated luminosity. So the uncertainty coming from the luminosity measurement. Then you have the uncertainty coming from the fake rates measurement, as I mentioned earlier. Then you have all other experimental sources of uncertainty. So from your B tagging, because we use DeVito, trigger efficiencies, pre-firing weights, lepton ID efficiencies, and all others. Now, in order to measure these systematic uncertainties, for example, let's take an example of the lepton ID efficiency. So first of all, it is called experimental uncertainty because you are applying a lepton ID, which basically comes from the measurement of some variables. So it is already you are talking about an experimental procedure. So you measure the efficiency of your lepton selection from data and from Monte Carlo using tag and probe technique, and then you basically divide those efficiencies to get the skill factors, and then you correct your Monte Carlo with these skill factors. But there is an uncertainty on those skill factors, and that uncertainty actually comes from various sources. For example, one of them is the way you fit your signal into that for that measurement, or the way you fit your background, or the selection that you chose. So all that contributes to the uncertainty of that skill factor measurement, and then the uncertainty on that skill factor can impact your signal strength measurement here. So that is just one. That is just one example. The another one is, for example, the jet energy scale, where you are you are applying a jet selection or counting jets in your analysis by applying some kinematic selection, and basically this measurement of the energy of the jet is not very it comes because it's a measurement again, so it comes with uncertainty. So there are various factors and that can affect the measurement of the energy of the jets. It either comes from the detector calibration or it comes from the pile-up contamination, that you are maybe over estimating the energy of the jets, or your offset is wrong, or there are many ways. The response of the detector is different in different let's say the ETA regions, and also response is, as you know, calorimetric response is different, or is it a function of, it varies as a function of the energy of the particle. So all these major uncertainties comes into picture, and they actually affects the energy measurement of the jets. Now, so you have to take that into account in your analysis, because you are using jets in your analysis. So so what you do is you vary, for example, the PT of the jet by this number that is given by the JetMet POG. Let's say this is 5%, so you vary the PT of the jet by 5% up and down, and then you repeat your analysis, and you see the impact on the signal strength, and then you take that as your yes, you can say the estimate of the impact of that nuisance on your analysis. So there are various sources. Now these are all, you can say, categorized into the experimental and the theoretical part. So the experimental comes from the experiment, and the theoretical uncertainties comes from, for example, the cross-section the cross-section variation. So you are using some cross-section given by theory in your analysis, and although you are measuring the cross-section, but you still start with some cross-section given by theory, and there is an uncertainty on that cross-section, and that uncertainty comes from many sources, like the Parton distribution function that you use to generate the sample, or the QCD scale that you use to generate the sample. So if you vary those parameters, your cross-section can vary, and that can impact your analysis. So you take into account all these sources of uncertainty into your analysis, and these are all the sources that we have considered. Now, one other source of uncertainty that comes that contributes majorly in this analysis comes from the background normalization. So, as you know, as I mentioned in the previous slide, that we are using these control regions like this TT bar, Brilliant, Tau Tau into the analysis to get the normalization of that particular background. So now, when you extract the normalization, and this is done, by the way, simultaneously again using the FIT, so you can along with the signal templates, you can also insert the distribution or the data cards of your control regions, and Higgs combined package takes care of the normalization of those backgrounds. So there is an uncertainty associated to that normalization or that factor that basically with that you scale your background in the FIT, and that uncertainty is important. It's quite important, because once you extract that normalization factor, the uncertainty can vary along the years, or can be very different. Now, I mean, the sources of uncertainty are analysis dependent. It depends on what kind of analysis you are doing, how sensitive your analysis is, and many things. But one very important aspect of uncertainties that you have to take care when you are doing a full run-to analysis is, because you have 3 years of data, you've seen maybe different detector response in 3 years. So you have different features, different efficiencies of your objects, different selection efficiencies. So you really want to decide which uncertainties I should correlate when you combine all 3 years, and which not. Now, as you see here on the rightmost column, so these are the uncertainties. Almost all the experimental uncertainties we uncorrelate, and the reason is that we use different object definitions across all 3 years, and the efficiencies of those selection was different. So they were like really, I mean, even though we were exploring His2WW in 3 different years, but they were like completely 3 different analyses in a way, because you have different object definitions, different selection efficiencies, and hence you kind of have to uncorrelate those uncertainties, those sources of uncertainties. Now, theoretical uncertainties on the other hand are correlated, because theory is theory. You know, it doesn't depend on the year of data you are analyzing. They are what it depends on, of course, is your center of mass energy, which was same across 3 years. So that's how you decide, and that can have a very large impact on your analysis results. So you really have to go uncertainty by uncertainty and see from where it is coming, and then decide whether you have to correlate it or not. Now, of course, there are recommendations comes from LHC cross-section working group, as well as from Higgs combination group, that whether you should uncorrelate this or uncorrelate this, because it's not only about one analysis, but because at some point they have to combine analysis from all the other subgroups, like Higgs to WW, Higgs to GZ, Higgs to gamma gamma, Higgs to TT Higgs, Higgs to tau tau. All these will be combined. So every analysis is expected to treat their uncertainties in a similar way, and so that once you combine, you don't have complexities or problems. Okay, so on slide 35, so these are the final distributions of the invariant mass of the two leptons, which is a very important variable. As you can see here, for example, in the left hand side are the MLL variable in the PT Higgs bins, so the bins that we use for the measurement, and you can see here for the WW background, you have this MLL peaking at higher values than your signal. The signal here is the Higgs signal is the red line, and this ratio plots, or this bottom part of the canvas, basically shows you the background subtracted signal, and you see that your observation matches very well with the Higgs signal here. So you really see all these events are basically the Higgs candidate events for Higgs to develop in various PT spins. And similarly, on the right hand side are for the various jet pins that we use for the measurement. So 0 jet, 1 jet, and 2 and 3 and 4. So so slide 36, I'll just quickly touch on the correlation matrices. So this is one thing that you have to study when you perform differential measurements. So the Gen and Rayco level distributions are not perfectly aligned, because there are, of course, detector level effects. There are detector effects in the Rayco level distributions. So you really have to go from Rayco level to Gen level in order to measure this cross section, and hence you have to unfold. This is what we discussed, and you can have bins where you can have, let's say, a generator level bin which is contributing to many Rayco level categories, because you measure you are not measuring the energy well, or you have miscalibrations, or the detector effects comes into the picture. So you have to, so this misalignment of the generator level and the Rayco level distributions, you have to take care. And these matrices actually exactly show that, where you have on the horizontal axis are the Rayco level bins, and on the vertical axis are the Gen level bins of the, for example, the PT Higgs in this case. Now there are two parts of this matrix here in the PT Higgs bin. So there is this blank line, and below that is basically the unregularized, and above this is the regularized part of the response matrix. Now the regularization, what it does is it basically reduces the negative correlations across the bins, and we only use it for the PT Higgs because this variable is very difficult. It has low resolution, very difficult to model. So you really have to use regularization in order to reduce the negative correlations. And for the number of jets, you see that's why we only have one part of the matrix, and you see that that you have contribution of one Gen bin into the various Rayco bins, and you have to take that into account when you measure the cross section. Now, quickly on the impact of those uncertainties that I showed you in that table on the measurement. So this is one example of the impact of the uncertainties on the zero jet spin signal strength, and you can see that the theoretical uncertainties. So these names are really, I mean, they are not, they are just the naming convention is given by Higgs combination group. They're not very intuitive, but you see here that these are the theoretical uncertainties are the major uncertainties. So the message from this is that we are not statistically limited in the zero jet case, but if you go higher in the one jet, not only in the one jet, but also in the like the 3 jets, 4 jets, and the statistics becomes the major uncertainty. Now here, statistics is not the major uncertainty, it's the theoretical part, and some experimental sources are the major uncertainty. So these are called impact plots, by the way, and they are also, you can get them from the Higgs combined package when with your data cards. Now these are for the PT Higgs bin for the 0 to 20 GeV bin, so for one of the bins, and here you see that the fakes are in the major background along with not the major background, but the major sources of uncertainty along with the theoretical ones. So slide 39 are the results. So these are the fit results that you get for these two PT Higgs and the number of jets. So you see the signal strength, which is the ratio of the cross section that you measure to the cross section that you have from the standard model for various bins. So with the 0 jet bin, 1 jet, 2 jet, 3 jet, and 4 jet, and more. So you see that as you go higher in the jet bins, your uncertainty is getting higher. And similarly for the PT Higgs, if you go higher in the PT Higgs, your uncertainty is becoming more and more. So for these bins, we are still statistically limited. Okay, in another form, you can see these results. So this is the the final result. So this is the differential cross section as a function of the PT Higgs on the left plot, and on the right plot is for the number of jets. So you have the measurement as the black dot, and you compare it with various theoretical models. So we have POHAG as well as AMC at NLO, and we see a very good agreement between the theory and the experiment here for all the bins. Now we also performed a combined fit, and we measured the fiducial the complete, so basically integrating over these bins, you can also measure the total cross section of Higgs, and this is what we observed. So we have 86.5 with an error of 9.5, and if you remember, we had a theoretical cross section which was close to this number in the previous slides. So that's Higgs to WW differential, and now I'll quickly show you Higgs to GZ for lepton results. I'll not go into the details of this analysis, but this is again a full run-to analysis. So this is the Higgs peak. This is the famous Higgs to 4 lepton invariant mass plot, where the red one and the red distribution is from the Higgs, and you see here that we see a very nice peak of Higgs boson in 25. Now these were the signal strength and the coupling measurements of this, but since we are more into differential, so I'll skip that part. But if you, on slide 44, you have the STXS measurement from Higgs to 4 leptons. So all these bins that I showed you in the beginning, you measure the signal strength in those bins, basically. And this is the fiducial and the differential. This is the fiducial cross section of the Higgs to 4 leptons, so Higgs to GZ to 4 leptons, and this is what they measure. And of course it matches well with the theory, and they have, and now we have, I mean, for example, I mean, for every analysis we have measurement at 7 TeV, which was in run 1, 8 TeV again, which was in run 1, and we have 13 TeV, and everything matches well with the standard model uncertainties. And these are the differential cross sections. So in Higgs to WW, for the first measurement, we consider PT Higgs and number of jets as our variables, but in Higgs to 4 leptons, since it's a more cleaner channel, you have 4 leptons in the final state, 4 isolated leptons in the final state, and no MET. So basically it's a high resolution channel, so you can go in more detail, or you can go. You can measure cross section in various other variables. So they used 4 variables, and this was for the preliminary result, and now for the paper they are adding more variables. So this is PT of the Higgs on the leftmost plot. Then you have the rapidity of the Higgs, the number of jets, and you have PT of the leading jet. And you see that every measurement matches well with the expectation. Okay, so summary. So I've showed you Higgs to WW differential results for the full run 2, and it has been one of the highlights of the Higgs results with full run 2 because it is a very difficult and very important analysis, because you can go really high in the PT Higgs, and you can measure this cross section in the high jet multiplicity bins because of the high branching ratios. Now, this was actually the first run 2 paper that entered into CWR from Higgs, and it was the second public result from Higgs with full run 2 after the 4 leptons. Now, in Higgs to WW, we are planning a second round of differential measurements with ultra legacy data set. So with the more improved data set in terms of calibrations and performance, and we will add more number of observables. So we are in discussion with the LHC cross section working group and with the theorists that what they are more interested in. So we will add those variables in our measurements. Now, for every, I mean, you understand that for every variable we add, we are adding one more analysis basically in there, because you have to have different strategies to optimize your analysis in those bins. So adding more and more, you are basically you're basically adding more and more analysis optimizations and more work for everyone actually. So of course many more results from other channels are still to come, and that's the on slide 48 are the outlook. So from 2012, when we first saw Higgs, we have come far in the measurements. Most of the inclusive measurements of the analysis are public with the full run 2 data, and now the focus is on the STXS and the differential fiducial cross-section measurements, because we can interpret them into various other BSM models and these effective field theory frameworks. That is also a very hot topic these days in CMS. And as you have seen that in some like really in some of the bins, these differential measurements are still statistically limited. So run 3 that will be starting in 2022 will definitely help in making it more precise, because we are that will double the data set that we have in run 2 before we go into the other long shutdown. And a lot of effort is ongoing to identify the possible interesting variables. And once we have results from every individual analysis, then the plan is to also have the combined or the combination of the differential measurements in late next year or early 2022. And at some point, we will also combine with Atlas to have an LHC combination of these differential measurements. So just some advertisement of the team. So you are welcome to join us, and you can contact Higgs to WW conveners directly, or send a message to me, and we can discuss the possibilities of your contribution. Of course, we will need a lot of young people and students in our group, because we have to run this analysis in run 3 and later on. So thank you very much. That's it.
Thank you, Arun, for the extensive discussion. This, as you said, that this analysis is very involved and a lot of things have to be taken care of. It's really very nice. I'll go through them. Just quickly, do you plan to do this rapidity differential distribution?
It's not, rapidity is not possible in Higgs to WW because you cannot reconstruct the full Higgs.
Okay. Sorry. Yeah, that's a stupid question.
No, it's fine.
Mm-hmm. And okay.
But we plan to include, for example, like the jet PT, the leading jet PT, which is important.
I thought you said, yes.
No. Right now
you did number of jets. Okay, you did
number of jets. Yes, and with the second round we will include I mean, we are very actually interested in also including something like the invariant mass of the leptons, because that is quite this is quite a characteristic of Higgs-2WW. And also this variable is quite model independent in a way. I mean, it's just the invariant mass of the two leptons, so you can get it from any model. And so that's one variable. And also, like as I said, I mean, leading jet PT, and we'll see. I mean, what theories can will recommend. I mean, we are in contact with them. But we want to squeeze as much as possible from this run.
Sure. If you can just go maybe slide number 39.
39. Yes.
So here, this PT Higgs, it is going up and down, the signal strength. Yes. You have any comment or not particularly?
Well, I mean, there are many
within
sources.
Statistical uncertainty, of course.
Yeah. Within uncertainties. I mean, these measurements are very hard to control because especially in the analysis like this. I mean, if you compare this distribution, for example, with the Higgs-2ZZ, you will find that more stable. Because you can reconstruct full Higgs, and you can really measure that because you have just 4 leptons, so you can really measure those things very precisely. But in this case, you have jets and you have MET, so it's really hard to really precisely measure PT Higgs. So yeah.
But of course, this plot, I would say that it would have been also nice to see vertically. See, like typically we are used to seeing the sigma dpt.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, this is yes, as you are right, but since this was a differential, this was a cross section.
Yeah,
because
cross section. So mu standing around 1. If it is vertically put, then maybe it is easy to say that there right, is no deviation. Yes. Essentially, everything is standard model line.
Yeah, but anyways, I mean, this plot actually has to be translated to cross section, right? I mean, this is the signal strength. That is not the cross section. So you have to.
Yes, that I understand. So signal strength 1. So if it is vertical, then we say okay, everything is there. But this is another.
I mean, these are the plots that were public, basically.
Yes.
So this is.
I remember this. You mentioned once about this fitting that regularization. And you said for different final state that kappa or whatever, I don't remember now, that is different.
Yeah. So it really depends. It really depends how in agreement you are with your Reco and Gen level bins. So for example, in the number of jets case, it's really simple to count the number of events in 0 jet, 1 jet, 2 jet, because all your selection is same, right? So in that case, we do not need regularization because the negative correlation, I mean, this misalignment basically induces negative correlations between signal strength modifiers. So because you have contamination of events from one bin to the another. So for example, let's imagine you have 0 jet or 1 jet generator level bin. Now, what is the contamination? You have to ask a question that what is the contamination of this bin, of this generator level bin, or how into the Reco level bin. So if you have 1 jet in the gen, you have 1 jet bin. How many events you have of this 1 jet bin into the 0 jet Reco bin, or 2 jet Reco bin, or 3 jet Reco bin? Now this contamination is really not very huge in case of number of jets, because it's not a very complex variable. You are just counting jets.
That is true.
But in case of PT Higgs, since you it's not a high resolution channel, so you can really have a very big contamination of, for example, of this bin into many other bins, and as you can see, it's a very high percentage of events that can really go into the other bins. So you really have to minimize the correlation, and of course regularization comes at a price. You are introducing a bias in your measurement when you are adding regularization, because you are artificially reducing the negative correlations by introducing these extra terms, and hence you are basically worsening the precision of your measurement. But you have to do it, because otherwise you won't be able to purify your contamination of that particular bin. So you you will be reporting the cross section of 40 to 80 bin, but it will have a lot of contribution coming from the other bins. But you want to reduce that correlation. So you really have to use regularization in this. For example, in Higgs2GC, they never use regularization for any variable. You don't need it because if you see their correlation matrix in their paper or in their pass, they are very diagonal. You don't those diagonal elements, the contamination is really small. So you don't really need regularization in that case. But in the low resolution channels,
that is so.
Have contamination, so you really need to use that regularization.
And I will read the paper.
Yeah, and that is one method that is implemented in this Higgs combined. You can Google this Tikhonov regularization. This is a very typical.
Yeah. Okay. I should.
A very typical regularization that we use.
Okay, thank you. There is one, just you have to, of course, rush out now. The one question from Arnav. In the pool distribution, the large deviation of nuisance, there are large deviations of nuisances from zero. So
this is, yes. Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, these are, first of all, these are the observed impacts. So you see that some of the uncertainties are pulled, like for example, the efficiency of the electrons. So sometimes sometimes you overestimate some uncertainties, and they can be pulled in the fit. But if an uncertainty is unnecessarily pulled, you really want to understand that, and in order to understand that, we do likelihood scans of that uncertainty. So yeah, I mean, some uncertainties were pulled, but they were I mean, that was like, the feature of the fit. We couldn't do much about them because the inputs were correct. We did a lot of checks with those uncertainties. For example, if you look at the fakes, which is see if it's there in, yes, for example, this one, number 19. So these are a bit constrained, as you can see. I mean, because the original was 30% and you constrained them, but you can I mean, reduce this 30% to a smaller number, but we don't know the flavor dependence like really clearly, so we want to be conservative in the approach. So that's why we have this 30%, for example. So I mean, this electron efficiency, as I said, which is number 12, is constrained because you sometimes in some of the, by the way, these efficiencies are measured in the bins of PT and eta of the electron, and for some of the bins you can get a very high uncertainty because of the difference in the fit that you do in the Tegan probe or something else. So you suddenly can get a very high uncertainty in one of the bins, and that's why it gets constrained. I mean, overall, the impact is not very large, as you can see, but these uncertainties are very difficult to control. I mean, theoretical uncertainties are not very difficult to control, but experimental.
So in fact, I am still learning this. This left-hand part of this of this plot. So what are these uncertainties? From where did you get 30%? Say, for example, previous one.
This 30% fakes.
So
yeah.
Okay. So this one plot is a theta cap minus theta 0 by delta theta. Okay, I understand.
Right. Yes.
But
yes.
then going up and down so much. So, but here we see that it's not too much. That blue-green bands Even
So you
if
mean the
deviation is
swapping?
much
You mean
more,
the swapping or what?
no, the amount of that R hat, you can say, how much it is getting affected
Yes,
is,
yes,
and even if the deviation from 0 is theta cap minus theta 0 by
yes,
delta theta.
yes,
So this value, say for example, for Parton sharing, I think PS, it
yes.
is some value. But the previous one is quite high, above 2. But the amount of effect it has is the same.
Yeah, yeah. So Parton shower
What does-
actually is a shape uncertainty.
No, my point is, how does it happen? That the deviation is very large.
Yes,
Theta
because,
cap minus
for example, for the fakes, they are not the major background in the analysis. So I mean, even though the uncertainty is high, the uncertainty on the inputs is high, but this is only applicable to the fakes, right? This is not applicable to the signal or to any other background. And for example, the non-prompt background is not a major background in this.
Oh, okay.
So the impact on the signal strength is not very large, although the local impact of the uncertainty is large on that background. But if you translate it into the impact on the signal strength, that's not huge because the background is not very dominating.
Okay.
I mean, if you see here, for example, for example, this one, the number 4, which is basically is in top 5, so it has a very huge impact on the signal strength, and this comes from the normalization of the top background. And now a top background is one of the major backgrounds in the analysis. So so if you vary the normalization of the top, that will have a huge impact on the signal strength, and that's why it's like really on the top of the chart. So yeah, it depends on how important that effect.
That is true. Yeah. Okay, maybe one last question because you have to go. So what Arnav asks next is that, is the normalization correlated or uncorrelated?
It's correlated. You have to correlate. I don't know if I mentioned it because the definition of the control region is same across 3 years. Okay, yeah, for example, this CRSR. Okay. So yes, I mean, these are correlated, as you can see, as I've written here. And the reason is that we are not changing any definition of the control region across 3 years. So you really you really are keeping the same phase space definition, so you have to correlate them. Unless you use different definition, you have to correlate the background normalization uncertainties.
Okay, thank you. Okay, one more question. Sorry. Okay, he says thanks. So I think you said already that you will have to go 2.5, so we should not hold you so much. So thank you, Arun, once more for the very nice talk.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
To discuss all the details of the analysis. This is one of the very important analysis, as you said, and very complicated. So you explained things nicely.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
And yeah, for students, I mean, feel free to to contact me if you want more details or anything. Yeah.
Okay. Bye then, everybody. Thank you. Have a good day. Bye.
Bye.